Right, diving into something I'm sure we've all felt at some point, right? Anxiety. But we're ditching the usual expert analysis and going straight to the source. Raw, unfiltered, and surprisingly relatable, Reddit's anxiety.
You know, it's fascinating. The subreddit, it's like a window into the real lives of people, like actually dealing with anxiety daily, a mosaic of experiences,
Mhm.
all unique but connected by this common thread.
Exactly. And anxiety, it's not a one-size-fits-all thing, right?
Yeah.
Reading these posts, it's kind of amazing how many different ways it impacts people. Like take Cohesh Buffet. They were talking about their fear of, well, death,
Yeah.
heavy stuff. And get this, it triggers this intense feeling of derealization and panic for them. What's going on there?
That's a really good example of how, our emotions, our minds, they can actually manifest physically. Derealization is that feeling of being detached from reality, right? It's actually the brain's way of coping with overwhelming fear, stress, too much. It's like an escape hatch when things get too intense.
Wow, the brain's got some wild defense mechanisms. And speaking of different ways anxiety shows up, there was You Dragon Queen 18. They were talking about high-functioning anxiety, appearing fine, on the outside, but inside.
Yeah.
Whole other story. As someone who's, been there, it really resonated with me.
Yeah, and high functioning anxiety, it's often misunderstood. It doesn't always fit the stereotype, right?
Yeah.
But it's a real struggle. People might be killing it in some areas of their lives, but then bam, totally paralyzed by anxiety in others. It's so true. And then there's the guilt that comes with it. Like you, Leslie Nopachuk Testa, imagine dealing with a parent's health crisis, which is already terrifying. And then on top of that, you're hit with this wave of helplessness and guilt. It's like a double whammy.
It really is. And that guilt, it's a common thread in anxiety, that feeling of not doing enough, of somehow being responsible for things you can't control. And for some, like Eukarya 709, it extends to loved ones. It's like this by proxy anxiety. They're consumed with worry, intrusive thoughts about something terrible happening.
Like their anxiety takes on a life of its own, and not just them, but their relationships too, right? And then there's the social aspect. Remember the emergency SALT 1971? Social anxiety makes them feel like and I'm quoting here, a coward, and it impacts their self-esteem, relationships. It reminds me of how often people mistake social anxiety for shyness. Right. And it's so important to realize that social anxiety it's so much more than just being shy. It's a real fear, a fear of social situations that can be so intense, so debilitating that it actually prevents people from, everyday stuff.
It's like their world shrinks,
Mm-mm.
to avoid those situations that trigger that anxiety.
Mhm.
And speaking of shrinking worlds, Wojciech Xavier's post, it really got to me. Paralyzing morning anxiety,
Mm.
that feeling of like life losing its shine, feeling totally overwhelmed before the day even starts. It's heartbreaking.
Yeah, and that paralysis, knowing what you need to do but being frozen by this anxiety, that's a huge part of how it impacts us, our motivation, our ability to just function. Like our minds are stuck in overdrive, can't shift gears. It's like their body's stuck in like this constant fight or flight mode. Every
Wow.
sensation, every little thing is a threat.
And that's got to be exhausting.
Absolutely. And as we go through these posts, the physical side of anxiety, it's impossible to ignore.
Yeah, for sure.
Remember Snaker Ballure? They described this wave of physical symptoms, like a racing heart, that feeling of impending doom, and on top of it all, this paranoia.
It's like their body is screaming at them that something is wrong,
Yeah.
even if their mind isn't quite caught up yet.
Exactly, and that's where I think health anxiety comes in, which honestly we see a lot of on the subreddit.
Oh, yeah.
You got Uma Twinette, You Cerbled Animals, You Severe adds 7598. They all talk about being consumed by worry over physical symptoms, convinced it's something serious.
Convinced it's a heart attack waiting to happen.
Exactly. And that's the mind-body connection in action, right?
It's like a feedback loop.
Yeah.
Anxiety creates physical symptoms, which then fuel more anxiety, and on and on.
Precisely. One thing I found concerning was the number of people expressing fear or reluctance to actually seek help.
Yeah, that's a big one. I mean, there's still such a stigma around mental health in general,
It's true.
and it prevents people from getting the help they need.
Exactly. And posts like Your Remarkable Prior 857, ULXAJ241, they highlight that fear of judgment, right? That worry of being seen as weak or I don't know, incapable for asking for help.
Like they're supposed to just snap out of it.
Exactly. And it's heartbreaking because it prevents so many people from getting the support they need.
And even when they do seek help, it's not always easy, especially when it comes to medication. We saw a mix of experiences on the subreddit, some finding relief, others dealing with side effects and having to try different things.
And that's why personalized treatment is so crucial when it comes to anxiety. Medication, it can be a game changer for some people,
Oh, for sure.
but it's not a one-size-fits-all solution.
Definitely not.
It has to be tailored to the individual, often in conjunction with therapy.
Speaking of therapy, that seemed to be a big one for a lot of users. Some found it incredibly helpful, while others were, still trying to find the right therapist, the right fit for them.
Right, and it makes a huge difference.
So what's your take on the role of therapy in managing anxiety?
I think therapy offers a safe and structured environment to really explore the root causes of someone's anxiety.
It's not just slapping a Band-Aid on the symptoms, right?
Exactly. It's about digging deeper, developing coping mechanisms, challenging those negative thought patterns that keep people stuck.
So it's equipping them with the tools to manage their anxiety long term.
Exactly.
That makes a lot of sense. And what about the sense of community? We saw a lot of people finding comfort just from reading other people's stories, realizing they're not alone in this.
Absolutely. There's something incredibly powerful about connecting with others who truly understand what you're going through.
It's like finding your people, right?
Exactly, and it chips away at that isolation that often comes with anxiety.
Which can be huge.
It reminds us that we're not broken, we're not weak, we're not alone in experiencing these things.
It normalizes it in a way.
Exactly.
And that's so important. Amidst all the fear and uncertainty that we saw in these posts, there were also these glimmers of hope and resilience, which was really inspiring to see.
Oh, absolutely.
Like startled animals finding relief in the ER, getting that validation that it was anxiety, or You Careful Onion 5017 celebrating going on a date after 2 years of struggling with anxiety.
Oh.
2 years. That's huge.
That's incredible. And those victories, no matter how small, they're so important. They remind us that progress is possible.
Yeah, it's like even when things feel really tough,
Mm-hmm.
there's always that possibility of, things getting better.
Exactly. And I think that's what makes these stories so powerful.
Sure.
They remind us that even in those really dark places, that hope, that resilience, it's still there.
It is, and sometimes you just need that little spark to reignite it.
Absolutely. And those sparks, they can come from the most unexpected places, like finding support online, connecting with others who get it.
Definitely. Like that
Yeah.
feeling of not being alone in the struggle. It can make all the difference.
It really can.
Wrapping up this deep dive into the world of anxiety through, well, the eyes of Reddit,
Hmm.
it really drives home the fact that we're not alone.
It really does. It's so easy to feel isolated when you're struggling with anxiety, but these Redditors, they're sharing their stories, their struggles, their triumphs, and it's like this collective exhale.
Totally. It's like saying, hey, I'm going through this too,
Yeah.
and suddenly it doesn't feel so scary anymore.
Exactly. And they're also highlighting the importance of finding what works for you, right?
Right.
Because anxiety, it's not one size fits all. What works for one person might not work for another, and that's okay.
Absolutely.
The key is to find what helps you manage it, whether that's therapy, medication, lifestyle changes, support groups, or a combination of all of those things.
Yeah. And to not be afraid to ask for help,
Exactly.
which can be hard, but it's so important.
It is. It takes courage to reach out, but it can make all the difference in the world.
Well said.
And I think that's something to really take away from this deep dive. You are not alone. There is hope, and there is help available.
Couldn't agree more. It's been really eye-opening to dive into this world, and I think we could all learn a little something from the honesty and the vulnerability that we've seen in these Reddit posts.
Absolutely. And, if you're out there listening and you're struggling, please remember that you're not alone. Reach out, seek help, and be kind to yourself. You've got this.
Beautifully said. That's a wrap on another deep dive, folks. Thanks for joining us.